Yazio, the Montauk Chair. In 1983, at an abandoned Air Force base in Montauk, Long Island, a classified program achieved something impossible. They built a machine that could materialize human thoughts into physical reality. The Montauk Project was the continuation of the Philadelphia experiment's research into electromagnetic manipulation. But, while Philadelphia accidentally sent a ship through time, Montauk did it deliberately and went much further. The device at the center was called the Montauk Chair. It looked like a dental chair surrounded by antenna arrays and electromagnetic coils. Through electromagnetic fields and specific radio frequencies, the subject's thoughts would be broadcast and manifested. According to Preston Nichols, an electrical engineer who claims to have worked on the project, the chair was connected to a computer system that could read and amplify brainwave patterns. When a psychically gifted subject sat in the chair and focused their thoughts, those thoughts became real. The first successful test came in 1981. A subject codenamed Duncan Cameron visualized a rubber ball. Within seconds, a physical rubber ball materialized on the floor. It wasn't a hologram. It was solid, tangible matter. The program escalated. Subjects manifested complex objects, tools, weapons, living creatures. In one test, Cameron visualized a building, and monitoring equipment detected its electromagnetic signature appearing briefly in the facility courtyard. But the most disturbing experiments involved time manipulation. When subjects focused on specific dates, they opened portals to different time periods. Multiple witnesses described seeing shimmering doorways showing the past on the other side. Researchers allegedly sent subjects through these portals. Some came back, others didn't. Those who returned reported experiencing the past as completely real, touching objects, interacting with people, physically existing in different eras. The final experiment in August 1983 went catastrophically wrong. Duncan Cameron was told to materialize the most destructive thing you can imagine. What emerged was described as a massive creature that couldn't be controlled. It began tearing through the facility, existing partially in multiple dimensions. Researchers destroyed the power generator, collapsing all portals simultaneously. The creature vanished, but so did several researchers who were never found. The base was sealed, equipment dismantled, and participants subjected to forced memory suppression. Official records show Camp Hero was decommissioned in 1969, but locals report strange lights throughout the 70s and 80s. Electromagnetic anomalies are still detected, and witnesses continue coming forward with consistent accounts despite having no contact with each other. Preston Nichols, Duncan Cameron, and Al Bielek have all passed lie detector tests while describing their experiences. Combined with documented anomalies at Montauk, something extraordinary happened there. The Montauk experiments proved that the barrier between thought and reality is thinner than we believe, and that knowledge was too dangerous to acknowledge. Project Rainbow. On October 28, 1943, the USS Eldridge was docked at Philadelphia Naval Shipyard for what the Navy called routine testing. What actually happened became the Philadelphia Experiment. And the truth is stranger than the legends. The experiment was based on Einstein's unified field theory. The Navy wanted to make ships invisible to radar, using electromagnetic fields that bent light and radio waves around objects. Dr. Franklin Reno's team designed massive electromagnetic generators, creating fields strong enough to achieve this. 4 generators were installed on the Eldridge, along with 2 massive coils. At 9 a.m. on October 28th, the generators activated. The Eldridge began glowing with greenish light. The glow intensified until the entire ship was enveloped in green fog. Then, according to multiple witnesses, the destroyer completely vanished from sight, radar, and all electromagnetic detection. For 15 minutes, a 1,240-ton warship ceased to exist. When the ship rematerialized, the crew was in distress. Some were violently ill, others disoriented, but the most disturbing cases involved molecular phase shifts. Several crew members had become partially fused with the ship's metal structure. One sailor's hand was embedded in a steel bulkhead. Flesh and metal merged at molecular level. Another was discovered with his body melded into the deck, still alive but impossible to extract. Other crew members reported being in 2 places at once. They claimed they'd been in Norfolk, Virginia, 250 miles away, during the invisibility period. Navy records show the Eldridge was spotted in Norfolk that same day, though the Navy never explained how it traveled 250 miles and back in 15 minutes. Most disturbing were crew members who developed freeze-phase syndrome. They would suddenly become immobile and invisible, as if slipping out of phase with reality. These episodes lasted minutes to hours. When they returned to visibility, they described being trapped in a gray void where time didn't function normally. Carlos Allende, observing from the SS, Andrew Furuseth, later described seeing the ship vanish and the crew's reactions. His accounts included specific details about the crew's conditions he couldn't have known publicly. He named sailors who went insane, described the molecular phase shifts, and provided information about classified debriefings. The Navy claims the Eldridge was never in Philadelphia on October 28, 1943, but the ship's deck logs for that period are missing. Multiple witnesses saw the Eldridge vanish. Electromagnetic anomalies were detected in Philadelphia Naval Yard for years. Einstein had been working on unified field applications for the Navy during World War II. His research notes remain classified. John von Neumann's complete wartime work has never been declassified. Tesla's final papers on electromagnetic field manipulation were seized by the FBI immediately after his death in 1943, months before the experiment. Most crew members were transferred and forbidden to discuss their experiences. Several died under mysterious circumstances. The few who tried to speak publicly were dismissed as delusional. The technology wasn't abandoned. The research continued in deeper classification levels. The ability to manipulate electromagnetic fields to affect matter and time was too valuable to discard. The Soviet Time Mirror. In 1987, at a classified facility in Novosibirsk, Siberia, Soviet scientists successfully demonstrated a device that could observe events from the past. They called it Kozyrev's mirror, after astrophysicist Nikolai Kozyrev, whose theories about time as physical force made the technology possible. Kozyrev believed time wasn't just a dimension, but actual energy that could be focused, reflected, and manipulated. His most controversial claim, time moved in spirals, and with the right apparatus, you could access information from any point along those spirals. The device was deceptively simple, a large, curved aluminum mirror shaped like a spiral, positioned inside an isolation chamber. When subjects sat at the focal point, shielded from electromagnetic interference, they experienced time dissolution. The first test occurred March 15, 1987. Dr. Viktor Grebennikov sat in the mirror for 30 minutes. When he emerged, he was visibly shaken, claiming he'd witnessed events from his childhood with perfect clarity, not memories but actual observation. Grebennikov described events he couldn't have remembered, conversations his parents had when he was an infant, details of his home destroyed before he could form memories, specific objects later verified through photographs. The program expanded. When subjects were given historical targets they had no connection to, the results were even more disturbing. One subject with no World War II knowledge was told to focus on Stalingrad, December 1942. After 45 minutes in the mirror, she drew detailed battle positions, described specific officer conversations, and provided tactical information verified against classified archives she'd never accessed. The subjects weren't imagining the past, they were observing it. Time appeared to be a field that could be tapped from any point. The Soviet military immediately elevated classification levels. If refined, the technology meant perfect intelligence from any point in history. No secret would be safe. Every classified decision throughout history could potentially be observed, but prolonged exposure caused psychological breakdown. Subjects experienced temporal confusion, unable to distinguish past, present, and future. Some developed time sickness, spontaneously slipping into observation states and seeing the past overlaid on present reality. 3 researchers committed suicide between 1987 and 1989. Their notes suggested they had observed their own futures and couldn't reconcile what they'd seen with present reality. One left a note. "I watch myself die. I know when and how. I cannot live with this knowledge." In 1991, as the Soviet Union collapsed, the Kozyrev Mirror project was abruptly shut down. Equipment was reportedly dismantled. The facility was converted. All documentation was permanently sealed, but the technology didn't disappear. In 2005, Russian researchers published a paper on torsion field generators, using spiral aluminum structures to affect consciousness. The paper made no mention of Kozyrev, but the equipment was functionally identical. The Soviet government classified it at levels reserved for nuclear weapons. They shut it down not because it failed, but because it succeeded, and a device that could observe any point in history was too dangerous to pursue openly. HAARP's hidden purpose. The High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program sits on 35 acres in Gakona, Alaska. Officially, it studies the ionosphere. The reality is far more disturbing. HAARP consists of 180 antennas, each 72 feet tall. Together, they transmit 3.6 billion watts into the ionosphere, the electrically charged layer 50 to 400 miles above Earth. This makes it the world's most powerful ionospheric heater. The stated purpose is studying how the ionosphere affects communications, but the power levels go far beyond what simple research requires. Dr. Nick Begich obtained internal military documents suggesting HAARP was designed to test full-spectrum dominance, controlling the electromagnetic environment for military purposes. When heated by HAARP's transmissions, the ionosphere becomes conductive. This conductivity can be manipulated to jam enemy communications, potentially affect weather patterns, disrupt electrical grids thousands of miles away, and influence human brain function through extremely low-frequency ELF waves. In 2010, strange phenomena were reported before major seismic events. Unusual light patterns, electromagnetic anomalies, and radio disruptions, all consistent with ionospheric heating, were documented before earthquakes in Haiti, Chile, and New Zealand. Researchers examining HAARP's operational logs found it had been running high-power tests immediately before several earthquakes. The correlation was statistically significant. The ionosphere is connected to Earth's surface through the global electrical circuit. Heating the ionosphere creates pressure waves that propagate downward. If directed at tectonic stress points, the additional energy could theoretically trigger earthquakes already close to occurring. Military documents from the 1990s, obtained through FOIA, describe research into ionospheric modification for military purposes, including weather modification and geophysical manipulation. The most disturbing aspect involves ELF capabilities. These frequencies penetrate deep into Earth and ocean, useful for submarine communication. But they can also affect human brain function, which operates at 1 to 40 hertz, the same range HAARP generates. In 1997, Defense Secretary William Cohen stated, "Others are engaging in an eco-type of terrorism whereby they can alter the climate, set off earthquakes, volcanoes remotely through electromagnetic waves." HAARP was one of few facilities with the power to attempt such manipulation. In 2014, the Air Force transferred HAARP to the University of Alaska, claiming it wasn't needed for military research. But the infrastructure remains. The array is fully functional. High-power tests continue. Independent researchers monitoring HAARP's signature report that powerful transmissions often correlate with unexplained atmospheric phenomena worldwide. Unusual aurora displays, mysterious booms, and electromagnetic disturbances affecting satellites. Whether HAARP actively manipulates weather or triggers earthquakes remains unproven, but its capabilities far exceed simple ionospheric research. And the military's continued interest in an officially abandoned program suggests HAARP's real purpose has never been acknowledged. The Hutchison Effect. In 1979, Canadian inventor John Hutchison was experimenting with Tesla coils and Van de Graaff generators in his Vancouver apartment when he stumbled onto one of physics' most bizarre phenomena. While running multiple electromagnetic generators simultaneously, a piece of metal began to levitate. This wasn't simple electromagnetic repulsion. The steel chunk rose slowly, rotated, and drifted across the room before falling. Hutchison set up cameras and began documenting what became the Hutchison Effect. Over several years, Hutchison recorded hundreds of hours showing objects exhibiting impossible behaviors. metal bars spontaneously fracturing as if frozen, despite being room temperature, different metals fusing together at room temperature with no heat, objects levitating with no visible propulsion, wood and metal merging at molecular level, flames appearing and self-extinguishing with no fuel. The most dramatic footage shows a 60-pound cannonball rising slowly into the air and hovering before crashing down. Other videos show metal objects spontaneously tearing apart, fracturing in patterns materials scientists claimed were impossible without extreme cold or stress. Hutchison contacted scientists and military researchers. Several witnessed the effects firsthand and confirmed the objects violated known physics. The Canadian government sent researchers who verified Hutchison wasn't using hidden magnets, wires, or conventional tricks. What made the effect mysterious was that Hutchison couldn't fully control it. The phenomenon occurred when he ran multiple generators at specific power levels and frequencies, but the exact combination varied. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. In 1983, the U.S. military visited Hutchison's laboratory. Shortly after, several pieces of equipment were confiscated on grounds that they contained restricted technology. Hutchison rebuilt his laboratory, but the pattern repeated. He would demonstrate the effect. Government researchers would visit. Then equipment would be confiscated. This happened at least 4 times between 1983 and 2000. The Hutchison effect, if genuine, has staggering implications. The ability to levitate objects, break molecular bonds, or fuse materials at room temperature would revolutionize manufacturing and transportation. More concerning militarily, the effect could potentially fracture enemy ships or aircraft from a distance. Skeptics argue Hutchison is an elaborate hoaxer, but multiple credible witnesses observed effects under conditions that would make conventional trickery impossible. Materials analysis of fused and fractured objects showed anomalies metallurgists couldn't explain. In 2000, NASA and Boeing researchers visited and witnessed several demonstrations. According to Hutchison, they left convinced the phenomenon was real, but no official report was published. Hutchison's work has been systematically marginalized. His papers are rejected. His demonstrations are labeled fraud without investigation. His equipment has been repeatedly confiscated. In 2006, Hutchison moved to Germany after claiming increasing pressure from Canadian authorities to cease research. The Hutchison effect represents phenomena that official science refuses to acknowledge, experimental results violating established physics, but too well documented to simply dismiss. What's certain is that multiple governments have shown intense interest while simultaneously suppressing it. That pattern suggests they believe there's something real, something too valuable to ignore and too dangerous to acknowledge. The SRI, Remote Influence Program. In 1972, the CIA funded a classified program at Stanford Research Institute to test whether human consciousness could not just perceive distant locations, but actually influence physical events there. This wasn't remote viewing, it was remote manipulation of reality. The program was led by physicists Dr. Harold Puthoff and Russell Targ. The CIA wanted to know if consciousness could affect random number generators, influence biological systems, or manipulate physical objects at a distance. First experiments focused on electronic random number generators, producing truly random sequences. Subjects mentally influenced the generator to produce more ones than zeros. Results were statistically significant. Skilled subjects could influence output beyond what chance would predict. The program quickly moved to more ambitious targets. In 1974, subject Ingo Swann demonstrated remote perturbation. Shown coordinates where a magnetometer was operating, Swann focused his consciousness on the device and claimed he could affect its readings. The magnetometer recorded automatically. During exact periods when Swann claimed to be influencing it, readings showed significant deviations unexplainable by environmental factors. The effect was repeatable and occurred only when Swann was actively attempting influence. The CIA classified the results and expanded the program. Over 5 years, subjects demonstrated ability to influence bacteria, growth rates at distant laboratories, affect laser system output from hundreds of miles away, alter radioactive material, decay rates, which should be constant, influence laboratory animal behavior remotely, affect individual neuron firing patterns in isolated brain tissue. The most disturbing experiment occurred in 1978. A subject codenamed Natural was given the location of a nuclear weapons storage facility. Without being told what was there, Natural reported sensing something dangerous and powerful. In a controlled test, Natural attempted to influence the trigger mechanisms while classified sensors monitored the weapons. During 3 sessions, sensors detected anomalous electronic signals in trigger systems, signals occurring during exact periods when Natural claimed to be affecting them. The implications were terrifying. If a human mind could remotely influence nuclear weapons electronics, no security system was truly safe. Any trigger or electronic component could potentially be manipulated by a skilled psychic anywhere in the world. The program was immediately elevated to highest classification. Testing continued under extreme secrecy. Subjects were isolated from all outside contact. Multiple layers of electromagnetic shielding ensured effects weren't due to normal radiation. The effects persisted. In double-blind protocols where neither subject nor researchers knew which target was real, subjects still influenced correct targets with statistical significance. In 1982, the program achieved full demonstration. A subject successfully influenced a random number generator in a shielded vault 2,000 miles away, monitored by independent researchers with no SRI contact. They reported anomalous output during the exact window when influence was attempted. This success led to immediate termination of public research. The official explanation, remote viewing hadn't proven useful enough, but the remote influence program didn't end. It went into deeper classification. Former researchers claim the program continued under different names at different facilities. The focus shifted from proving the effect to weaponizing it. A 1995 CIA report claimed to debunk all psychic research. But it focuses almost entirely on remote viewing and says virtually nothing about remote influence. The omission is telling. The SRI research proved consciousness isn't confined to individual brains. It can reach out and affect the physical world. That knowledge was too dangerous to make public and too valuable to abandon. The Biosphere Silence. In 1991, 8 people sealed themselves inside Biosphere 2, a massive enclosed ecological system in Arizona. The official mission was testing whether humans could survive in completely closed environments, crucial for space colonization. The experiment lasted 2 years and was widely covered as an ambitious but flawed ecological attempt. What the media never reported was what really happened inside, and why the project's data remains classified. Biosphere 2 was a 3.14-acre structure containing 5 biomes: rainforest, ocean, savanna, marsh, and desert. It was designed as completely sealed from outside, with 8 crew members living inside for 2 years, growing food and recycling air and water. Within months, strange phenomena began occurring. The crew started reporting time distortions, periods where hours seemed to pass in minutes, or where they'd lose track of time despite numerous clocks. Dr. Roy Walford, the crew's physician, documented unexplained physiological changes. The crew's metabolism was slowing beyond what caloric restriction could explain. Their circadian rhythms were destabilizing despite controlled lighting, mimicking normal day/night cycles. Most disturbing, their aging markers showed inconsistent results. The ecosystem began behaving in ways violating ecological predictions. Oxygen levels dropped faster than photosynthesis alone could explain. Carbon dioxide concentrated in ways not matching atmospheric mixing models. At night, crew members reported strange phosphorescent patterns in the air. By month 6, all crew members experienced what they described as a presence, a sense that something was aware of them, watching. The sensation was so pervasive they established protocols for dealing with it, referring to it in logs as the observer. Electronic equipment began malfunctioning in patterns engineers couldn't diagnose. Sensors showed readings violating physical laws, impossible temperature gradients, electromagnetic fields with no source, acoustic signals from within the walls. The most disturbing incident occurred 14 months in. For approximately 3 hours, all external communication ceased. Video cameras continued recording but didn't transmit. When communication restored, the crew reported nothing unusual happened, but video footage told a different story. For those 3 hours, crew members moved in perfect synchronization, performing tasks with coordinated precision that seemed choreographed. They didn't speak or make eye contact. They moved like parts of a single organism. When shown footage afterward, the crew had no memory of those 3 hours. Medical examination showed all 8 had identical memory gaps, something that shouldn't be possible from normal psychological causes. External researchers wanted to terminate immediately, but the crew refused to leave. They claimed they were close to understanding something important. Management continued the experiment but installed additional monitoring. Additional sensors detected anomalies project scientists couldn't explain. Localized gravity fluctuations, brief time flow distortions confirmed by atomic clocks inside and outside, showing slight desynchronization, and electromagnetic patterns resembling structured information with no identified source. The final 6 months were conducted under near total media blackout. When the crew emerged in September 1993, they underwent extensive examination. Results have never been released. All 8 signed comprehensive non-disclosure agreements. Several have since died under circumstances family members questioned. The few remaining refused to discuss the final months. The facility's complete data archive was classified and moved to an undisclosed location. The Biosphere was sold to Columbia University in 1995, then University of Arizona in 2007. Neither attempted to replicate the original experiment. Researchers trying to access original data through FOIA requests have been told records are exempt on national security grounds, extraordinary for what was supposedly a privately funded ecological experiment. Whatever the truth, it remains locked in classified files. Biosphere 2 stands in the Arizona desert, a monument to an experiment that discovered something so significant it could never be publicly acknowledged. The Coral Castle Mystery. Between 1923 and 1951, a 5-foot-tall Latvian immigrant named Edward Leeds Kalnin single-handedly built one of America's most inexplicable structures. Coral Castle in Homestead, Florida, contains massive coral rock sculptures, some weighing over 30 tons, that Leeds Kalnin cut, moved, and precisely positioned using unexplained methods. The castle's most impressive features include a 9-ton gate so perfectly balanced it moved with a finger, a 30-ton coral block serving as an upper floor, walls of massive blocks fitted together without mortar, a coral sundial accurate to within 2 minutes, a 28-ton obelisk Leeds Kalnin moved and erected alone. What makes this extraordinary? Leeds Kalnin worked entirely alone at night and refused to let anyone observe. He stood 5 feet tall and weighed 100 pounds. He had no formal education, no heavy machinery, no cranes, no workforce. When asked how he moved blocks requiring modern cranes and teams, Leeds Kalnin gave cryptic answers about understanding the pyramid's secrets and knowing how to work with nature's energies. He claimed to understand magnetic currents and how to manipulate them. In self-published pamphlets, Leeds Kalnin described electromagnetic energy theory not matching conventional physics. He claimed everything was held together by individual magnets, tiny currents that could be manipulated with proper understanding. He built strange electrical devices, coils, wheels, and magnets in patterns he never explained. Neighbors reported strange lights and unusual humming sounds at night. Some claimed to have seen massive stones glowing faintly before Leeds Kalnin moved them. In 1936, when the land was sold, Leeds Kalnin moved the entire structure, over 1,000 tons, to a new location 10 miles away. He did this in a single night using only a rented truck. How he loaded 30-ton blocks, transported them, and unloaded them without assistance has never been explained. One teenager claimed to have secretly observed Leeds Kalnin late one night. He described seeing the builder place hands on a massive block and hearing strange singing. According to the witness, the block began glowing and slowly rose from the ground, floating in air. Leeds Kalnin then guided it into position like a balloon. The account was dismissed as fantasy, but certain facts remain unexplained. No scratches indicating stones were dragged, No evidence of rolling equipment, pulleys, or cranes. No foundation damage from immense weight being moved. Perfectly circular holes drilled through massive stones with no tool marks. Engineers who studied Coral Castle agree conventional construction cannot explain Leeds-Kalnin's accomplishment. The precision, the weight, and the lack of standard moving techniques all point to an unknown method. In the 1940s, researchers offered substantial sums to reveal his techniques. He refused all offers, claiming the knowledge was too dangerous to share and that modern science had forgotten principles ancient builders understood. Leeds-Kalnin died in 1951, taking his secrets with him. In his workshop, investigators found strange equipment not matching standard tools, modified batteries, homemade electromagnets, mechanical devices whose purpose couldn't be determined. Most equipment disappeared shortly after his death, confiscated by parties claiming to be federal researchers. In the 1950s, physicist Harold Aspdin examined remaining equipment and concluded Leeds-Kalnin had been experimenting with what modern physics would call zero-point energy. Aspdin believed Leeds-Kalnin found a way to temporarily cancel gravity by manipulating fundamental forces. Recent researchers suggest acoustic levitation, using sound waves at specific frequencies. But acoustic levitation requires enormous power and sophisticated equipment Leeds-Kalnin didn't have access to. The truth is, we have no explanation for how Edward Leeds-Kalnin built Coral Castle. The structure stands as physical proof that one man, working alone with no modern equipment, accomplished what conventional engineering says is impossible. Coral Castle remains open to tourists, but the real mystery, Leeds-Kalnin's method, died with him, joining forgotten knowledge humanity once possessed and somehow lost. The FireWire Dimension. In 1994, researchers at Los Alamos National Laboratory discovered something impossible while testing high-speed data transfer. Digital information transmitted through fiber optic cables at certain configurations was arriving before it was sent, violating causality and suggesting a dimension where time operates differently. The discovery was accidental. Dr. Raymond Chen's team was testing maximum data transfer rates through a new fiber optic network connecting different buildings. They noticed some data packets' arrival timestamps were microseconds earlier than transmission timestamps, initially assumed to be clock synchronization error, but when they synchronized all clocks to atomic standards and ran tests again, the effect persisted. Data was consistently arriving 8 to 12 microseconds before being sent. This should have been impossible. Nothing travels faster than light, and even at light speed, packets should have taken longer than the negative time they were experiencing. Chen's team began systematic testing. They varied cable length, transmission power, data packet size, and environmental conditions. What they discovered was more disturbing. The effect only occurred when data was transmitted at very specific power levels through cables in particular geometric configurations. When they analyzed which packets experienced time displacement, they found something extraordinary. Packets weren't just arriving early. They were arriving through a route that didn't exist in normal space. Diagnostic tools showed data entering the cable and emerging at the other end without passing through intermediate segments. The data was taking a shortcut through what researchers called data space, a dimension where information could exist independent of physical medium. Further experimentation revealed stranger properties. When transmitting complex data patterns at critical power level, the receiving system occasionally got data that hadn't been sent yet. In one test, they transmitted a random number sequence and received back a different sequence. 3 seconds later, when they transmitted again, they sent the exact sequence they had received 3 seconds earlier. The data was traveling in a closed time-like curve, receiving its future self as input, then sending that data into its own past. Implications for computing were staggering. If data could access data space, processing could potentially occur outside normal time constraints. A calculation taking hours in normal space might complete instantly if processed in this other dimension. Military applications were even more concerning. Communication that couldn't be intercepted because it never existed in normal space. Data storage that couldn't be physically destroyed. And most disturbing, quantum computers that could receive answers from their own future selves, accessing infinite processing time. Los Alamos immediately classified the program. Chen's team was expanded and moved to a more secure facility. The fiber optic network where the effect was discovered was dismantled. By 1998, the team had built a temporal data router, a device reliably transmitting data into past or future by several seconds. The device used specific geometric cable patterns, precise power modulation, and apparent quantum entanglement effects. Then, in 1999, something went wrong during high-power testing. A data packet transmitted into the past created a causality loop. The packet triggered a response, sending another packet further into the past, triggering an earlier response, creating a cascade threatening to destabilize the system. The researchers shut down equipment, but the loop had begun. For approximately 17 seconds, the system received data from its own future states, each transmission triggering an earlier transmission in accelerating cascade. Monitors showed impossible data amounts, flowing through cables not transmitting anything. When the loop collapsed, the fiber optic cables had physically aged. Material analysis showed degradation, as if they had been in service for decades, despite being newly installed. They had experienced years of time compressed into 17 seconds. More disturbing was what happened to the data. Fragments recovered showed information that couldn't have originated from any test. Complex calculations, messages in unknown formats, data patterns encoding three-dimensional structures the software couldn't interpret. One researcher claimed recovered data included an English message: "Stop. You're creating resonance across the boundary. This path leads to..." The message ended there, cut off mid-transmission. The project was immediately terminated. The temporal data router was dismantled, components sealed in separate facilities. All research data was classified at highest levels. Team members were reassigned and forbidden from discussing their work. In 2014, a Chinese research team published a paper describing anomalous data transmission effects in high-power fiber optic systems. They reported instances of data arriving before being sent, but dismissed it as measurement error. The paper was quickly retracted at the Chinese government's request with no explanation. The FireWire Dimension, this data space where information can exist outside normal causality, might be more than laboratory curiosity. Every fiber optic network might be brushing against this dimension without realizing it. And somewhere in classified laboratories, researchers are almost certainly still exploring the boundary between data and reality. Die Glocke. In the final years of World War II, Nazi scientists working in a secret facility near the Wenceslas mine in Poland developed what may have been the most advanced piece of technology of the 20th century. Codenamed Die Glocke, the bell, this device allegedly manipulated gravity and time itself through principles that modern physics still cannot explain. The bell was described by SS General Jakob Sporenberg during his 1945 war crimes interrogation. According to his testimony, the device was bell-shaped, approximately 9 feet wide and 12 to 15 feet high, made of a hard, heavy metal. Inside were 2 counter-rotating cylinders filled with a mysterious violet-colored substance that Nazi scientists called Serum 525. When activated, the bell generated an enormous electromagnetic field that allegedly produced anti-gravity effects. But more disturbing were the reports of what happened to living tissue exposed to the device during operation. According to recovered documents, early experiments killed every living thing exposed to the bell's field. Plants placed near the device during testing crystallized and disintegrated into a gray ash. Animals exposed to the field died within days, their tissue decomposing into a black, gel-like substance. 5 of the 7 scientists working on initial tests reportedly died from exposure, but the Nazi scientists didn't stop. They refined the device, eventually achieving what they called time dilation effects. Objects placed within the bell's field apparently experienced time at different rates than the surrounding environment. Clocks would desynchronize. Biological samples showed accelerated or decelerated aging. The bell required enormous amounts of electrical power, so much that it could only be tested briefly before overloading Germany's electrical infrastructure. Tests were conducted in a specially reinforced concrete structure that still stands in Poland today. A bizarre circular building known as the Henge, that locals claim still emit strange electromagnetic readings. Most disturbing were allegations that the Nazis successfully tested the bell with a human subject, an SS volunteer who was placed inside the device's field during full activation. According to fragmentary accounts, the subject survived but emerged claiming to have experienced being in 2 times at once. He reportedly aged several years during a test that lasted only hours in normal time, then died within days from massive cellular damage. As Soviet forces closed in on Poland in early 1945, the Nazis frantically evacuated the facility. The bell and all documentation were removed. General Sporenberg executed 60 scientists and technicians who had worked on the project, ensuring their knowledge died with them. But the bell itself was never found. Some researchers believe it was flown to South America in the final days of the war, possibly aboard one of several U-boats that mysteriously reached Argentina after Germany's surrender. Others suggest it was captured by American forces as part of Operation Paperclip, and that research continued in the United States. Physical evidence for the bell remains controversial. The reinforced concrete structure in Poland exists and shows unusual wear patterns consistent with exposure to intense electromagnetic fields. The surrounding area shows persistent anomalies. Compasses malfunction, electronic equipment experiences interference, and vegetation still shows stunted growth patterns decades later. In the 1990s, Polish journalist Igor Witkowski discovered classified transcripts of Sporenberg's interrogation that described the bell in detail. Witkowski's research sparked international interest, but attempts to verify his sources have been blocked by Polish and German authorities, who claim the documents are either forgeries or remain classified for national security reasons. The most compelling evidence comes from post-war documents showing that the U.S. government was intensely interested in German anti-gravity research. Project Paperclip didn't just recruit rocket scientists. It specifically sought out researchers who had worked on electromagnetic propulsion and field manipulation. Several Nazi scientists who may have worked on the bell were brought to the United States after the war and placed in classified research programs. Their work remains sealed in government archives. Some researchers claim that modern black-budget anti-gravity programs are based on principles first discovered by Nazi scientists working on Die Glocke. Whether the bell actually existed or was a desperate Nazi propaganda attempt remains debated. But the physical evidence, the concrete structure, the environmental anomalies, the documented deaths of scientists, and the intense post-war American interest in German electromagnetic research suggests that something extraordinary was being developed in that Polish facility. If the Nazis successfully manipulated gravity and time, even briefly, the implications are staggering. The technology would represent a quantum leap in physics that conventional science didn't achieve for decades, if at all. And if the bell survived the war and research continued in secret, it would explain decades of UFO sightings that describe vehicles moving in ways that violate known physics. The truth about Die Glocke remains buried in classified archives in Poland, Germany, Russia, and the United States. What's certain is that something happened in that Polish facility that multiple governments want to keep secret, and that secrecy suggests the technology was real and potentially still in use. These 10 experiments share a common pattern. They achieved results violating our understanding of reality, and those results were immediately suppressed, classified, and erased from public knowledge. Consciousness manipulating physical matter, devices observing or altering time's flow, electromagnetic technologies affecting weather, earthquakes, or human minds. Objects moved through means physics says are impossible, data traveling through dimensions we don't officially acknowledge, gravity itself being temporarily negated. These aren't fringe theories or conspiracy fantasies. They're documented research programs that achieved measurable results so disturbing that governments and institutions decided the public couldn't know. Researchers who witnessed these phenomena faced a choice: stay silent and keep their careers, or speak out and be dismissed as delusional. Institutions that funded the research faced similar choices: acknowledge that our understanding of physics is fundamentally incomplete, or classify everything and pretend it never happened. They chose secrecy, and that secrecy creates a strange paradox. Humanity has discovered capabilities violating known physics, but we can't use that knowledge to advance science because acknowledging it would require admitting that decades of official denials were lies. How many other experiments remain completely hidden? How many achieved even more extraordinary results? The experiments detailed here are only the ones where evidence survived, where witnesses came forward, documents were misfiled instead of destroyed, or phenomena were too visible to completely erase. The full scope of forbidden science remains locked in classified facilities, documented in files that will never be declassified, held by institutions that will never admit what they've discovered. But the knowledge exists. The technology is real, and somewhere, in laboratories with security clearances most government officials don't have access to, research continues into the boundaries of what's possible, boundaries that keep expanding into territory that official science still claims doesn't exist.